in what she does and everything, right? Saying that the Nigerian government or the people around or the government of that state is supposed to ensure that that woman in that community, have access to clean water, have access to clean energy, as opposed to people living in the GRA part of that environment. So environmental justice really is ensuring that everybody have equal rights to environmental things, talking about clean water, talking about air, talking about things that we do, in the environment. To say that, oh, this environment is in the master plan, they have a certain number of drainage, they have certain number of infrastructure. Meanwhile, because this environment is not in the plan, it means that, they cannot have access to these things. Before I move forward, I saw a video on the internet one time talking about a particular city in the US, how this particular city have lots of tree planted in the same area, like a different neighborhood. And then this other particular neighborhood does not have any tree at all, and then somebody said this is environmental injustice. Why would this neighborhood not have trees like this other neighborhood? And if you just think about it, really just have a mental picture of where everybody, in Nigeria, everybody in your environment, in the states that you live, have access to key environmental things, and then that they are being justified for living in a clean, safe, and green environment. So moving forward, I know a lot of people like to ask, why women, why women, why women? And this is Women's Month. Of course, it was International Women's Day on March 8th, where we accelerated action. And then this is just to celebrate all the women in, the climate space. Well done for the amazing work that you do. And so why do we focus on women really for environmental justice? Is because women have some sort of economic disadvantage. And why I said that is, if you look at a lot of environmental related jobs, like agriculture, farming, fishing, you see that women are at the forefront of this job. In fact, 60-70% of women work in environmental related businesses, right? And then when this land begins to depreciate, when the fishes in the ocean begins to die, it means that they do not have access to livelihood. It means that they do not have a way to feed their children, right? And then, for example, I live in Lagos, right? And I know Makoko market, fish market, and I have been there, right? And I can tell you, particularly in Makoko, that 90% of people selling fishes in Makoko are women. So what happens when all the fishes in the ocean dies? What would be their means of livelihood? You can see the economic disadvantage and why it is important that we focus on empowering women for environmental justice. Another important point why we are focusing on women today is that women are underrepresented. When you look at policy frameworks, when you look at even organizations like or conferences like COP, how many percent of women are present at the decision making? How many percent of women are lending their voice? Even look at the Lagos State Ministry of Environment, all of the laws, all of the policies, should be around women. Women are largely underrepresented in environmental policy, even though they are the forefront of the receiving, the effects and adverse of climate change and environmental degradation. But you can see the number of unrepresented violence. We've seen climate disasters like flood and drought, lead to lots of displacement and increase of exploitation of women. Say um the burning climate change that happened, which was the flooding. You see a lot of women were forced to migrate. You see the disaster, and then these women are prone to different gender-based violence, which really affects them. And that's why, this webinar is to cater to the needs of women, to ensure that women have fair environment, they have livable environment, they have green environment, they are protected like everyone else in the society, so that they do not face underrepresentation, they do not face gender-based violence that comes from disaster and displacement from their home, and they're able to have equal access to all of the things that they're supposed to have access to in the community. Moving forward, how does this environmental injustice really affect women? We've spoken about what environmental justice is. We've spoken about why we are focusing on women, but how does it even affect them really? Before we empower women for environmental justice, we need to know that environmental injustice affects women. When women do not have equal rights, when they do not have access to clean, water, um, in the for women, the adverse is just a lot, when it talks about women and they're talking about the survival rates, unlike men that have, physical strength, that are able to protect themselves. For example, maybe you are displaced from your home and you are trying to be in a camp. For example, women are not even able to protect their injustice that affects women. We also want to explore, the economic exclusion. And I've rightly mentioned before that women are always involved in environmental related jobs, farming and fishing. And this injustice will really affect their means of livelihood. If all the fishes die in Makoko today, how would women survive? Right? How are they able to, come out to say, oh, this is how I'm living, this is how I'm able to contribute to the economic value of this environment? Women who are farmers, in Nasarawa, if there is little rainfall, how will these women grow their crops? How will they sell? How will they make means of livelihood for them and their children? If you look at the woman that lives in Borno, for example, desertification, is costing means to her live of livelihood. How is she able to live comfortably as the caregiver in the home? How is she able to provide food? How does she even have, herself to be able to provide for herself, not talk for her family? So all this environmental injustice, cause some sort of economic exclusion for women because, like I said, they are always at the forefront of providing environmental related jobs, businesses. You see women always championing this cause. You look at startups, look at NGOs that are related to climate. You see that women are always the one pushing forward for a greener and cleaner environment. So when these women that I've mentioned and the example that I've cited, when they don't have this justice in the environment, these are the adverse. And then lastly, we talk about displacement and climate refugee. Like I've rightly mentioned, when there's displacement, women are the forefront of the one who are mostly affected. You see that they are helpless. You see that, it looks like they don't have anywhere to go to. They don't have a home. They don't have a means of livelihood. They don't have a means to move forward. And it's just really heartbreaking because these women are supposed to have access to a safer environment, whether, provided by the Ministry of Environment, whether by the federal government, whether by the local government chairman. As small as it is, women needs to be protected and they need to have environmental justice. So moving forward, we want to look at the strategies, that really key for empowering women for environmental justice. And when I was really thinking about this, you cannot tell a woman in Makoko about environmental justice that you want to empower her if she doesn't even know what it means. And when Auntie had asked me earlier, what are the challenges? Sometimes these women experience these things, but they're not even able to name what they're experiencing. They're not able to name what they're feeling. I participated in a project called Eco Anxiety, and that project was like a research to see how people feel when they're experiencing climate change. Say the heat waves, for example, how were they feeling? Say there was flood, how were they feeling? All of those things. So people do not even know what to name what they feel because they don't even know what they're experiencing. They don't know it is called environmental injustice. And one of the key ways to really address that today is education and capacity building trainings, right? When climate education that are led by women and they are for women. So when I'm speaking to a group of women, they can really identify with me because it's a woman to woman. They know that this person is probably experiencing the same type of health related issues from climate They know that, I am, I have, what it takes to take, to go through all of these things as a caregiver. When all these climate educations are being put in place for women, they are then able to know how to demand their rights. They're then able to know how to speak up. They're then able to know what it means for them to be environmentally justified, how to identify that they are even being marginalized in their environment. So if they're not educated, if they're not capacity building trainings, there's no how will be able to achieve this. And then this is to say that women need capacity building trainings. And it doesn't exclude just the women in the agricultural sector or women in fishing or women in farming, whether you live in the city, say you live in Lagos or you live in Abuja, you live in Port Harcourt. So if you're able to speak to couple of people in your environment, telling them really what environmental justice is and how it is their right to have clean water, it is their right to live in a very clean, safe environment, they begin to know that, okay, this thing is for me and I should demand it. And then the next thing is laws and policies that empower and protect women. And this is very important. And I'm happy that if you look at the last 5, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, women do not have access to buy land, for example. There are restricted laws. In fact, in some tribes in Nigeria, women are not supposed to own landed properties. And even if they own landed properties and they get married, they're supposed to will the properties to their spouses, right? So laws that support women, that protect women, and ensuring that, they have same access, inclusion access, it is very important, right? Because when these laws do not protect women, when these laws do not empower women, they begin to get affected. And then day by day, you begin to see the adverse effect of climate injustice on women. And when such laws and policies are not put in place to protect them, you see that the environment and even the world does not become a livable place for women in general. And then speaking, to another solution or strategies for empowering women is economic empowerment and climate financing. Looking at venture capital who are able to fund women-led businesses, who are able to fund women-led organization, providing, climate financing to specifically projects that are tailored towards women. And that is exciting because I've seen a couple of organizations who prioritize women-led projects, women-led, organization, women-led projects to ensure that these, because women are the receiving end and they're able to get more empowered, and ensuring that businesses that women do, whether they are social entrepreneurs, whether they're doing anything to protect the environment, that we really, really support them, because when we support them, they are supporting other women. And then we begin to see that the solution begin to replicate and we begin to go on and on. And the amazing thing is that once a woman is empowered at a time, maybe one business is led at a time, and you begin to see that everything just begin to fall into place. An example is grants, right? With your organization, or maybe you're a policy maker, maybe you're in the ministry, or even if you're just able to contribute to another organization to give grants to women-led businesses, to empower them financially, empower them economically, empower them through knowledge. They are able to demand for their right. They are able to have access to all of these things. And before you know it, we are empowering women already in our society, regardless of where they are living, regardless of their states, regardless of where they are in Nigeria or even outside Nigeria, they are able to be environmentally, empowered. And then just really to wrap up my thoughts, just so that we don't have so many information. If there's anything we have to remember for this webinar this evening is what we can do. And then the first thing that we can do is to educate other women on climate. People do not really know anything about climate, to be sincere. People do not really know so much about the environment. So how are they able to even demand their rights? How are they able to know that they're supposed to, the government is supposed to do this for them? And speaking to this, it might be as small as, say you're a business owner, or say you live in the city like me, like Lagos. You might be as small as maybe a makeup artist, maybe you're you're a hairstylist, you're a fashion stylist, for example, and you're thinking of how do I even demand environmental justice? How do I even talk about environmental justice? You can begin to research things in your line of business that can, help other women. Say maybe you find out a particular type of makeup or a brand that is big on environmental sustainability, and then you're able to speak to other business owners in that sector about infusing, sustainability, infusing climate related, actions into what you do day on a daily basis. It would really help, right? And why I say that is because education is diverse. How you will educate people who are in rural areas is different from how you educate people who are in urban areas. So when we educate other women, people who are not, who think that they don't have anything to do with climate, when we begin to educate them in their language, in what they understand, in what they see, when the storytelling is really tailored towards them, then we are able to really know that we are solving that problem. Right, because education is key for women to demand and to be empowered for environmental justice. And then the next, which is so dear to my heart, is supporting women-led projects. And what does this mean? Is because we have to ensure that projects that are championed by women, for example, Auntie has said that there will be a malaria outreach next month in Ibadan, and just really supporting her can really increase the number of impact that she's going to do for that project. And it will amaze you how that outreach can really limit the amount of people that are affected by malaria due to poor environmental sustainability, due to poor environmental actions, right? So when we begin to take conscious efforts to support women-led program and initiative, then we know that we are really empowering women for environmental justice. Because what I do in Lagos, what you do in your city, what you do in your environment is different, right? And we are tailoring to different needs. But when we begin to focus more and support more women-led businesses, then we know that we are really doing something amazing. And then another important thing is to raise our voice for environmental justice. It might be small, it might be little, it might be as well as, writing a letter, writing an article, contributing to a blog, putting down a comment on social media, signing a petition, or really asking our leaders for accountability can really go a long way in empowering women for environmental justice. And when we think about that, it is very, very advisable that we localize this raising our voice, because when we do not raise our voice for environmental justice, then it cannot be given to anyone, not to talk of giving to women. So whether it's about your project, whether it's in your environment, whether you are, a landlord and then there's landlord association meetings, and then they're talking about things to do about the environment, to do about the estate, you can begin to raise your voice. You can begin to bring suggestions of things that will make the environment more livable, more sustainable. If you are a business owner and then maybe you have associations, or even to your customers, you can begin to tell them about environmental justice. You can begin to tell them about clean environments, sustainable environments, the actions that they can take, whether as women that they are, whether as men, and even to children. We can begin to tell them that this is what is applicable in the society. This is what it means, when you have access to, free, a very clean air, when you have access to clean energy, when you have access to clean water. You begin to educate these children, whether in your family, whether in your neighborhood, one step at a time, one person at a time. Begin to raise your voice to tell them, and then you see that you begin to see effect, begin to see change, even though it might not be immediate, but I'm very certain that it is possible to achieve environmental justice. And when we begin to raise our voice, we begin to see the possibility of this, of the actions that we take. So I'll just wrap up my thoughts on a quote by Hindua Ibrahim. She's a climate activist, from Chad. And this is a quote that, she said that I picked for today's webinar. And it says that women are the first to experience impact of climate change, yet they are often the last to be heard. True environmental justice means ensuring that the voices of women, especially those in the front lines, are not just included, but led the fight for a sustainable and just world. And this is a very, very powerful quote by Hindua. Why? Because when we look at it really, the environment itself and the all of the things that are happening, climate and all of this, women are always, disadvantaged in this line. And you see that they are always at the receiving end, like Hindua Ibrahim has said, and that the real fight, the most important thing is that they are being included in decision making, in policy, in advocacy, anything we want to do. When we begin to consult women, when we begin to work with them, we begin to ask for their opinion, and we begin to impute their opinion in things that we do, then we begin to see that step by step, we're creating a very cleaner and greener environment for women to live, and they feel heard, they feel seen, and they feel protected, because everybody, regardless of who you are, regardless of your environment, regardless of your economic status, are supposed to have access to basic environmental needs. And these actions start by including women in the fight for this. So this would be my closing thoughts for this evening, and I hope that it's been I hope that you've really learned something. I hope it's been rewarding, so thank you so much. I just thought to close with that thought, and I can probably leave it on the screen, so that we can take questions or comments, maybe interact further.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Titilayo. Yes, as she has said, if you have any questions or if you have comments, contributions, please, you can signify by just put your hands up in using that reaction emoji so that we can identify you and you can unmute and ask your questions. So Titi, now we talked about women and you said that women are vulnerable, right? And we know that women are vulnerable, but is it beginning to look like men are becoming excluded in these conversations? Or it just so happens that, this happens to be Women's Month, and we're talking about it. But then there's also, you also mentioned that most of the time you see that, it's mostly women that champion the cause of, environmental justice, environmental degradation, climate action, environmental sustainability. Why?
That's powerful. Yes, that is very, very powerful. And that's something that I have thought about over and over again. But the first thing is to say that men are not excluded from the conversation, and that, for over the years, you see some of the, key major decisions or roles that are being made, whether in ministry, whether in parastatals, whether in conferences, you see that it's always men and men that are there. And the amazing thing is that these days, because of the, the call that we have for gender equality, the call for diversification, the call for inclusion, women are now key in those decision making. So I think that for a couple of years now, men have been involved and they are still involved, but it's because there is now a call, for women to be at the table, because they are the receiving end, they are vulnerable, and this climate, change impacts them more. So we've seen more women come into the space, we've seen more women-led action, we've seen more women projects, organizations springing up every day, led by women, so that women can, have a voice, so that they can be included, and so that over and over again, they can speak to their own solution, because it is their truth. It is them who is being affected. It is them who is being who is been excluded for a couple of years. So when we now come into action, it doesn't mean that the men are excluded. It means that women are just beginning to have a voice. And you see that some men, really support women led, women owned. And sometimes it looks like it's a tussle to say, oh, who is the higher gender? This is not like a gender conflict, it's not like a gender war. We are both working together for a clean and safer environment. But however, we want more women to be seen. We want more women at the table, and we want more women-led solution. Because if we're going to give a solution for a woman, it's supposed to be made by a woman, and collectively, we can begin to drive that action.
Fantastic response. I really appreciate the way that you said it, because sometimes when we talk about gender equality, some people get a misconstrued position or view of the
Yeah.
conversation, and they think that it's a gender war. It's men versus women, female versus male. However, as you've said, that's not the situation. We're all working together towards the same goal, and that goal is very vital. But you said that women are at the forefront, or this last word that you put here, women are the first to experience the impact of climate change. And you have explained that to us. I think you cited when there is a you cited that when there is remind me, when there is any climate crisis or
Yeah.
war or destabilization in regions, women and children, of course, are vulnerable, and they are the first to to experience the impact of these situations. However, some men would say that everything now, woman, 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 and some men or people would imply that. Do you think that this is a phase for women? Do you think that women have come to stay as leaders? Do you think that women in leadership positions currently, I mean, I know in the environmental space, women are doing a tremendous job generally, but would you say that we are leading the charge in leadership position in ways that shows that amplifies that we can actually, we're equals?
Absolutely, absolutely. I believe that, women have come to stay. I believe that, the equality thing is beginning to take, and we are standing side by side, because as the men are making their demands and making that decision, women too are making their demands and they're making that decision. And like you said, when you talk about gender equality, sometimes it begins to look like it's gender war, and we are fighting against it, and we're fighting against men. Oh, it's a women's thing, it's a women's, men are not inclusive. That is not the case. Because when we talk about environmental issues, it affects everybody. Whether men, whether women, whether children, whether youth, young and old, regardless of your age. When flooding happens, for example, in Lagos, where I live, it affects everybody. But the most important thing is that who does it affect the most, right? Say, these women who goes to sell, or even, for example, I've visited Bariga, a lot of times, and we've had a project there. And then you see that most of these women are like, maybe some of them are breadwinners for their family, some of them, cater for their kids. And when this happens, they have children, they have things, they have businesses, they have little things that they are doing. It immediately takes them off, right? Maybe climate destroyed their business, maybe they went bankrupt, or their goods soak in water. It will take them a longer time to be able to put themselves together. And for example, is if you want to access financing, thank God for a lot of fintech that are springing up that are women focused. If you want to access financing for business, for example, men have greater chances. Men have greater, in fact, there's automatic. There is automatic credibility and trust that this bank have for men before women. So women have to prove extra. They have to go all of the way. And meanwhile, both of them were affected by flooding that destroyed their business, right? Both of them have the same issues, but one person is affected more because it's going to take one person extra effort to get a loan in the bank to set up her business up and running. Meanwhile, it will not take the other person so much effort. And what we're just trying to do or say at this time, or the news and the visibility that women are getting in this space, is to say that women too should have this right. Women too should be treated equally. When I'm affected by climate change and I work up to financial institution, they're able to give me grants, they're able to give me loans. And for example, if you look at agricultural sector, I've mentioned that 50 to 60% of labor force in agricultural sector are women. When there's no rainfall, when there is drought, when plants are dying, when there's harsh economic conditions, how are these women able to live? How are they able to provide for themselves? And if you look at the urban perspective, say I live in, VI, for example, and VI is flooded, right? Because these are the most, or there is this heat waves, it affects everybody, right? And then
Oh,
you
yes.
have children, you are the one that has to cater for your children, you are the one that has to look at, oh, is she okay? How can I take care of them? When they are sick, you cannot even go to work. You have to be the one to take care of them because you are a natural caregiver, you are a homemaker, you have to do all of these things, right? And we're just calling on men to
Mm,
join us and to see us and to ensure that we have equal rights side by side. Because when it happens today, a woman will be more tense to cater for her kids and show up. It doesn't mean that men doesn't show up, but the natural motherly love, we ensure that she puts everything on hold to cater for her child, to ensure that the child have, good health when they experience health related issues that is from the environment. So it is not a all for gender war, rather it's
mm,
collaboration between men and women, saying that women deserve a table, women deserve a chance, that we can absolutely come together to work as a team to help women who are affected by all of these environmental issues. And then it is not to say that men are not included. It is everybody at the same time, because I mean climate change doesn't know gender.
mm. Fantastic. I think one of the key words you've mentioned there is collaboration. So it's supposed to be a collaborative effort. It's not a gender-based argument or war. It shouldn't never lead to that. And I'm happy that you are broken things down today, because a lot of times you hear people when they talk about equality, they have some people have a biased view about it, and they think that the if you see recently in leadership positions, women are stepping into big shoes and they're doing phenomenal job, right? But some people think that it's a fad, and that is what is in vogue now. And but I think that women have come to stay, just as you have said. Thank you so much, Titi Layo, for breaking down today's topic. Unfortunately, some of us have left the group. We had a little bit of a glitch, during the program. However, I'm sure that the rest of us who joined gained tremendously from your presentation today. It was wonderful having you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. And I hope that we'll see more of you. But before you go, you talked about environmental consciousness. And
Yeah.
this is for me. Do you think like what percentage would you put Nigeria in terms of environmental consciousness on a scale, on 100% scale?
Well, that is a very, very important and vital question, talking about environmental consciousness. And if I'm going to place us on a scale, I think that is we're going to below 40 over 100. And why I said that is looking at me, for example, me as a case study. right? I did not really know so much about the environment. I did not really know so much about climate until I was 20 something, right? And imagine if I had known that earlier on, as a child, I would begin to infuse that. I will begin to champion this because I would have done more for the environment. I would have done more for the society. And and then this environmental consciousness, goes into everyone. It goes into everything, businesses, corporate world. And the amazing thing is that climate is beginning to get the visibility that it deserves because the earth, we need to take care of it so that it can last longer for, younger generation. And one of the key experience that I will speak to environmental consciousness was the time I had spoken on Unilag Radio about climate education. And, somebody had called in to say, oh, we don't even know what you're talking about. I'm a student of Unilag and I don't know what what is climate change? And it's so surprising that this person is running a degree, and
Wow.
they do not know. So if you're telling them dispose their waste properly, they're telling them reduce, reuse, recycle, donate clothes, do this. They don't know how to do it, right? And sometimes I think that one of the beautiful thing about maybe African homes, even though we do not have the consciousness, is that sometimes we already see our mom do some of these things, but we
Of
don't know what
course.
it is, right? So when we have a plastic bottle, my mom can put oil inside, she can put granite inside, she can say, okay, the clothes that you are wearing, give it to your sister to wear. When we want to go out, switch off the lights, switch off electricals, don't waste water, don't do this, don't do that. And then when you come into the climate space and talking about reduce and reuse, it begins to now make sense that, okay, actually, I am doing this thing, but I don't know that this is what I'm doing. And then we are
Mm.
able to put a name and a face to environmental consciousness, then it begins to move. And like I said, it's because early enough, we are not taught about environmental consciousness, right?
Mm.
And then it's because when we now become adults, not very hard, it's very difficult to now
Yes.
put it in
To
our
marry the
consciousness.
concepts.
Yes, but I think a step at a time. And then you see sometimes people we do school outreaches for children who are just coming up.
Yes.
There are now environmental clubs in school other than just Red
Yes.
Cross. So the
Mm-hmm.
more and more generation, young people like me, and then also you who is doing amazing work at Clan, the environmental space begins to get more awareness. There is consciousness. People now begin to say, oh, okay, when I plant more trees, it will help the environment in this way. When I switch off my light, when I, carpool, as long as carpool, for example, in Lagos, or maybe using BRT and not driving, for example, can contribute to an environment that has, fresh air, and the people don't even know.
Yes.
So a step at a time, educating one person at a time, one community at a time, one group of persons at a time, we're able to create more environmental conscious people.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. We
Yeah.
have a question in the chat box, and it's by Sebasi Fasino, and her question is that what practical skills should be included in climate education programs to make women more resilient and active in climate solutions? And I think that this question, I was going to ask something similar. So
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, you and I were in this space and, been doing some work in this space. How can we do more? I think
Hmm.
that's what she's trying to ask.
Yeah.
What practical skills should be included in climate education programs to make women more resilient and active in climate solutions?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very important question, especially that it speaks to how women can be more resilient and it
Mm-hmm.
speaks to how women can be more active in the solution because if they are more affected, then, they should know how to protect themselves from all of this environmental change, climate change and the likes. I think some of the key skills that, women or that should be infused in climate change, or maybe when we're teaching climate education or environmental conscious stuffs for women or young people, I think the first thing is to know their environment, right? Because environment are diverse. Where you live, for example, the reality of your environment, the landscape, the weather is different from where I am living. So if I'm able to first of all know my environment, then I know what to do. I know the actions to take to make it more beautiful, whether we need to
Mm,
plant more trees, whether we need to encourage biodiversity, whether we just need to really dispose waste properly, as small as that. Because when you live in different terrain, you understand that there are different weathers, and you know that
yes.
what I do as a person, my action as a person, can make this environment more livable, or can make this environment less livable, can make it more harsh. So first of
Mm,
all, practical skill is understanding their environment, understanding how they can adapt in their environment, and most importantly, understanding how they can take action in their local community. It's a skill that wants to be included in, climate education program. Because if I tell you everything about climate education, fine, beautiful, but after the education, what do you do with the knowledge that you have? You need
mm,
to identify that, okay, they've taught me about climate action. I live in a rural community. I know that I'm not supposed to throw plastic inside the beach because I live around the beach environment, right? I know that if I want to dispose my waste, I should dispose my waste properly. I know that I should separate my waste. Because some people don't have the ability to separate their waste. I know that, if I separate my waste, maybe biodegradables from plastics and everything, and I know that I can call different organizations to come and pick up this waste, and then, or maybe I have items, for example, and those items can be reused to make different things. So when we have environmental conscious people and we have climate education, we need to infuse all of these skills, because when they know the peculiarity of the environment, when they know the peculiarity of what you're doing, then they begin to now take action to be resilient. They know that, okay, this is what is applicable, and this is what I must do as a person to begin to take actions. And then when they take action in their local community, you see that things just get, better and better. I hope that was able to answer the question.
um, yes, I believe so because she put up an emoji. Sebasi, was your question answered? You can unmute if you want. So I think that you answered my question, but I know you didn't answer my own question. Finally,
You did answer the question. Yes, she answered the question quite well.
okay.
Yeah, that was
Thank
a
you.
very good point.
Fantastic. Thank you. I
All
mean, for
right.
me, my own question is that you and I, people that, are in the environmental space, women that are in the environmental space, sometimes I look around and I get frustrated. I think, what more can I do?
Hmm.
Like my input is not giving like the required result to make a huge or a big difference. And I feel like, little trickles of water, when would you make that big impact where people understand what you're talking about and they value it? Because trust me, if we were here talking about a trending topic, we would have more, participants. Do you get what I mean? And but because we're talking about something of this nature, people are not really interested. And sometimes I find that it sometimes boils down to the kind of environment that we are and kind of things that we, pay attention to and that we love, right? However, I don't know, like, how can we scale?
Hmm.
How can women in the environmental space scale?
Hmm. I think that is a very vital question. And thank you so much for asking, because like you said, if this webinar was like a trending topic, or it was like a gist or like a
Mm,
gossip, you will really see people, join, and everybody will just want to know what is going on. But unlike when we're talking about, justice, environmental justice, people just aren't interested. And I remember when
mm,
you asked me earlier on, what are the challenges, is that people doesn't care. Like when you see other environment, other countries, there was a time that World Cup was played and Japan lost that match, and the whole Japanese fans that were on that stadium took it upon themselves to clean the stadium, the whole stadium completely, and they lost the match. It means that from a very tender age, from a very young age, they are being told about climate action. Right,
Yes.
but how can we scale we in this space? How can we make our voice heard? How can we ensure that more people are reached in this aspect? Is that I think that first thing first is to continue to do the work that we do. I know the amazing thing, that Clan is doing, and that you've mentioned that there'll be an outreach next month. I think that over time, when people begin to see the amazing work that you do, at some point you just break forth. At some point you begin to see traction, because trust me, it can be very discouraging, like you said, and sometimes you just really, it's frustrating to say this thing is actually good for you. People should actually know this thing. Why are you not interested? So we just, first thing is we need to just keep doing the work. Like I said, it's a person at a time, it's a community at
Yes.
a time, it's an individual at a time. So when I meet people and I see them do some certain things, and then they're like, why did you say that? Even though they do not accept what I'm saying at the first time, or they're not able to accept what I said, it's like a seed planted in their mind, planted in their subconscious. And then maybe when they scroll on Instagram and maybe they come across your reels, it plants another seed. The seed is being watered. And then maybe they see a billboard about a climate conference, and then that's spring another seed, right? And
Yeah.
then it keeps just going on and on and on. And then before there's traction, there's visibility. And I think that another thing that we can do for us in this climate space, to really scale, and I think that I've seen that work, is to ensure that we involve more people, regardless of what they are doing. So I used to use hairdressers and tailors a lot. So it was one of my friends that sews, and then he has these big clients. And I told him that, do you know that just by transitioning from plastic hanger to a bamboo hanger, you can charge your clients more and they'll be happy to work with you. And it's like, what do I mean bamboo hanger? Hanger is hanger. I'm like, no, bamboo hanger are more sustainable, right? Unlike plastic, there's plastic pollution everywhere. Lagos State generates over 2 tons of plastic daily. You don't want to add to that mess when and then you are going to be spending more, because plastic hanger are prone to break more. When you use bamboo hangers, for example, it's more sustainable, it lasts you longer, and you're able to preach such sustainability action to other fashion designers like you. And I kid you not, till today, he keeps using bamboo hanger, and I'm happy that this is
Fantastic.
part of the impact I can make. So people in different sectors, in different environments, in different spheres of life believe that climate action does not concern them, climate environmental things does
Yes.
not. But if we begin to break it down to the level, like whether who you are, whether you're working in the corporate space, whether you're working in tech, whether you're working in oil and gas, whether you're just a vocational person, or maybe you even bake cake or do small thing, there is how you can infuse climate action and environmental sustainability in what you do. So when we begin to not just target people that we think that can hear climate action, and target people that feel like has nothing to do with climate, and we begin to educate them, you will see that our work will begin to gain more traction, because they cannot start thinking of sustainable ways to infuse climate action and sustainability into what they are doing, right? And then from that way, you can now see that they know that actually I can take action from what I am doing in my shop, in my office, in my environment. I can take action, right? And then it's just really beautiful. So ensuring that we're able to continue the work that we are doing, just to reiterate my point, and involving more people who think that climate has nothing to do with them, can
Involving more
continue to,
people.
yes, contribute and give our work the scale. Because when a fashion designer is environmentally conscious, a photographer is environmentally conscious, all of these people come together and they see that, oh, one way or the other, I can actually impact my environment through my work, through my business, through my action. And then before you know it, you be able to get more reach, and then, it's scale.
Fantastic. I think that answered the question. Thank you so much for your time. We are 15 minutes above time, and we enjoyed every bit of the time that we spent with you. Thank you,
Thank you so
Titilayo.
much.
And this would bring our webinar, supposed to be for an hour too, but we're enjoying Titi so much so that we lost track of time. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to have you again. And this time we'll be talking about something completely different, right?
Definitely.
And I can't wait for that time. So thank you so much. This would be
Thank
the end of the
you.
meeting. Thank you, everyone, for
Thank you, everyone,
joining.
for joining. Have a great evening. Take care.